Welcome to All Things Policy, a daily podcast by the Takshashila Institution. We are a bunch of policy nerds based in Bengaluru, and we like bringing fresh perspectives to Indian affairs and Indian perspectives to global affairs. So grab a cup of coffee, sit back, and join us for today's chat.
Hi everyone, I'm Sarthak and I welcome you to All Things Policy. Cities are a country's growth engine. They generate the bulk of an economy's GDP, drive innovation, and shape the everyday lived experience of millions. And yet, when it comes to power, finances, and accountability, cities in India remain surprisingly constrained. In this episode of All Things Policy, we take a closer look at the state of urban governance in India through the lens of a municipal finance blueprint that was submitted to the 16th Finance Commission by Janaagraha Center for Citizenship and Democracy. To unpack this, I'm joined by Prabhat Kumar, Director, Public Finance, Janaagraha. Hi Prabhat, welcome to All Things Policy.
Hi Sarthak, thanks for having me. It's really great to be here.
So before we talk about the specifics, let's look at the big picture. When we talk about strengthening cities, one of the fundamental question that arises is how much power do cities actually have? How autonomous are Indian cities? And how has that been changing over time?
So if we think about Indian cities, we know 73rd and 74th Constitutional Amendment gave power to third tier of the government. Although the practice of the local governance in India goes long back, we have panchayats dating back to centuries. We had municipal corporations as early as 1800s, even somewhere, if I'm not mistaken, in 1700, somewhere in 1700, some municipal corporations were also created. However, when we think about power given to municipal corporations or municipalities in India, it's still a mixed bag. Some cities, very few cities enjoy that kind of power, which they can truly call themselves a urban local government or local government. Still, there are a lot of parastatals which continue to function alongside municipalities. And there are other state departments as well that continue to provide services. Within that, who is responsible for what? Who is accountable for what? Whether money is available for all type of services that are needed, get lost in details. If I just talk about Bangalore, where we are sitting right now, there are 8 major parastatals in addition to erstwhile BBMP, now GD, and further kind of divided into 5 municipal corporations. 8 parastatals which provide services or build infrastructure for citizens. We looked at the budget of all these parastatals somewhere some few years ago, and we found that Bangalore just accounts for around 8. BBMP accounted for just 18 or 19% of the expenditure done by all this. This is not improving.
Yeah. So, Prabhat, just sorry to interrupt you. I mean, this is for our audience. Parastatals are those agencies which provide city-level services but are not necessarily accountable to the city government.
Yes. Thank you for explaining that, Sarthak. So BBMP just accounted for 19% of the total expenditure done by BBMP plus these 8 parastatals. Leave alone other state departments like housing, education, or health that kind of provide some services to the citizens of Bangalore. So city governance continue to be a very fragmented space, which not single point of accountability. And sadly, this is not improving in most of the places. This remains the case across India.
Yeah, and, thanks for pointing out that the specific scenario, right? And also, your report also points out that in many states, the funding that goes to the parastatals, that has been increasing, but the funding that comes to the urban local governments, that has not increased as much, right? So it seems as if the parastatals have more fiscal powers, maybe.
So yes, so I think in what cases or for what sectors the money is going into local governments, or where the focus of urban spending has been. Urban spending in India has mostly, if we take an example of last 10-15 years, mostly concentrated in hard infrastructure sectors. So whether it will be water, drainage, to certain extent solid waste management, big metro projects, big flyovers, and most of these are kind of being developed by parastatal. So money for day-to-day service provisioning gets lost somewhere in details. So a lot of money does flow to parastatal, and we have looked at, and one thing that I want to highlight is in India, the level of transparency for urban local governments has improved significantly over the last 5 years. Now more than 95% of the cities across India are publishing their audited accounts, budgets, but the same is not true for parastatal. If I want to know for Bangalore, what is the kind of how much money all the parastatals and BBMP spent in last year, you won't be able to get the details for most of the parastatals working in Bangalore. You can get the details for BBMP. The same case goes across India as well, where the parastatals are, although more money is going to them, the level of kind of the transparency is there in the parastatals accounts or projects or budgets is much less than what is with that of city corporation itself.
Okay, thanks for bringing this difference here. But what I want to go one step back and look at the total resources that local governments have. Again, I know that you don't use the term local bodies. I think Constitution mentions the term urban local bodies. I think you talk about urban local governments. Now, in terms of fiscal autonomy, right? It seems as if the own resources that the urban local governments have as a proportion of GDP, it is anyway low, and it has also been declining. And for instance, municipal revenue as a proportion of GDP is very low in India, 0.77%, 0.8%. It's definitely lower than 1% of GDP. And if you compare it with other emerging economies, let's say Brazil or South Africa, which have around 10% of their municipal revenues as a proportion of GDP, or 8%. So that is low. And also, there has been a decline in that.
So if you look at the over total resource envelope available with urban local governments in India, so their own source of revenue, they constitute almost, if I kind of look at the numbers, own source of revenue constitute around 55%. I'm looking at the national level. Own source of revenue constitute around 55% of the total resource pool. Then there is assigned revenue and compensation, the taxes which are collected by state government on behalf of the local government. That constitute around 7%. Normally, these are the piggyback tax or a share of the motor vehicle tax that goes to the local government. Grants around 35%, and 3% is other sources of revenue. Even if you look at, you might consider that the 55% money that is coming from their own source of revenue, cities have certain autonomy over it. But within that money itself, the rules of the game is set by state government in most of the places. The cities have very limited leeway in either they can play with the tax rates by 1 or point or a very less percentage point. Otherwise, on what you will tax, whom do you tax, how, what are the exemptions, what should be the tax rate? Mostly states define a bracket. Otherwise, they define the kind of rate as well. How much money you can charge on water for water? How much money you can charge for solid waste management? All the rules of game are mostly set by state government. In many cases, these rules haven't been changed for last 15 years, 20 years. Water supply, the cost of electricity for providing water supply has gone multiple times. The cost of providing services has gone multiple times, but the water rate continue to be the same. Most of India, like if I take 90% of the cities in India, the rates haven't changed for last 10, 15 years. So in that case, even the money that is 55%, that is their own source of revenue, I won't call that fiscal autonomy. All the rules are set by the state government. And in many cases, the state government do consider kind of doing away with these taxes as well. And although this practice we were saying 5-6 years ago, where many state governments before elections announced that, oh, we will do away with property tax and we will give relaxation. Good thing that has happened, and that now we don't see this happening before elections, at least state elections. So that's one good thing happening. But there's a lot of need for further, I think, unshackling the tax itself. Where state government should give some power to local government. And also, I think rather than giving the power to local government in a country like us where it's so diverse, and also I think the fiscal contract between local government and citizens are still not established. So there can be some more kind of where automatic renewal of the tax base itself that's happening at regular intervals. Some of those innovations needs to be thought of. But while this is the story of own source of revenue, if you look at the grants, that forms a significant proportion. the grants, the nature of grants is itself changing. Where state governments, there is more tied grants that is going to local bodies rather than the untied grants. And that's happening in the subsidy evolution as well, which is supposed to be when the subsidy gives money, it's supposed to be kind of more untied grants. But the more and more tied grants are going to cities. If I take one example, I just want to give one data point that many of people will find surprising. So the untied grants that used to go for cities in Karnataka 12 or 13 years ago was more in absolute number than what goes today. So money available with cities to determine kind of where they can decide where they want or to meet the local needs in Karnataka today from state government is less than in absolute number what used to be kind of 12 or 13 years ago.
So there is more tied grants now.
More tied grants where state governments determines what should be the end use of those grants. And the cities themselves can't decide. So there is a kind of clawback on the fiscal autonomy in that space as well. State finance commissions, which are the kind of the rights, which are supposed to protect the right of cities in terms of the fiscal matters, they are also not working that properly, although we have seen improvement over last 5 years where more and more state finance commissions are getting formed, but still the outcome is yet to be seen. So overall, if we think about fiscal autonomy, I don't think we are moving in a very positive direction across the country. Here and there would be few places of where they are doing great. So but overall, as a country, less and less fiscal autonomy is kind of being given to cities.
Yeah. Thanks, Prabhat. In fact, from your points, right, I have a few observations, right? As you mentioned that user charges are not revised frequently. Maybe, again, another thing that also comes out is the property taxes. Generally, there is underassessment. You don't raise enough revenue. Now, because of all these things, somewhere the principle of benefit taxation, we are not following that, or at least that is not the results you are not getting. The idea is ideally the local services should be financed by charges on those who benefit, right, from property taxes, user charges, or the land value capture. You're not able to get the best out of it. Secondly, the point that you made about untied grants, the focus is now more on tied grants rather than untied grants, and I think that is also applicable for the Union Finance Commission grants. One of the finding of your report is when it comes to untied grants, the absorption is more, but when it comes to tied grants, the absorption is less. So cities don't have enough money. That's what on one side we are saying, but whenever they have money, they're not able to utilize it, and that's kind of a shame that the money that could have been used somewhere, you're not able to do it because of so much of conditions and all those things. And when you have these kind of conditionalities and you're not able to spend that money, it also implies that because cities have diverse preferences, the kind of country that India is, it's huge. Ideally, the requirements in a city in Nagaland will be different from the requirements of a city in, let's say, Uttar Pradesh, right? And they could have spent that money on their own requirements because of some sort of restrictions. They're not able to utilize it. So it's a loss for everyone, I would say.
Yeah. And also what we have seen in many places where the current is something very different. Some cities has already might have invested a lot in water supply. And if they get more grant, okay, now everybody has to spend 50% of their money on water supply. Then they end up doing kind of not so priority projects where the spending becomes, oh, now I have to spend some money, I will go and spend this money. So this is also, so it's a
efficiency loss, I would say.
Efficiency loss as well. It's a suboptimal expenditure. I would just like to kind of pick on some of the kind of the benefit, the taxes where the people who are enjoying the services. And when one thing that I would like to add, when property tax rates are not being revised, I think the people whose cost of the property has gone up or who has benefited from the kind of the infrastructure being put. Suppose a metro rail is coming up near my area and the cost of property and the kind of the quality of life has gone up. And if I continue to pay the taxes on the 10-year-old rate or 15-year-old rate, then I am being subsidized for some else cost. So a re-evaluation of the tax base, even if tax rate is not increasing, or even if you kind of keep the tax collection at the same rate. If you think, oh no, we don't want to charge that much to citizens, still it is needed to for the equity perspective as well. It's not just about the collection, but also from the equity perspective. I will talk about the example from Delhi where I come in. The water rate in a kind of high income society hasn't gone up. This is the same water rate for last 30 years.
13. Oh, wow.
Same, and that's so much subsidized. Still, the rate that was 13 years ago was subsidized. Still is subsidized, and still, and you get water bill after an interval of 2 to 3 years. Even kind of nobody is coming and saying, okay, why don't you pay tax? Why don't you? This is your bill and just pay the bill or some. So it's so inefficient, and that too in capital. Then you can think about the other places.
So again, building on this, right, I would assume that since the user charges are not collected based on, again, what kind of services you are providing, it implies that somewhere the services also get impacted because operation maintenance you will not be able to carry out. And on top of that, do we have good estimates of how much does India need, or how much do the Indian cities need over a period of time? Do we have those kind of estimates right now?
Yeah. So there has been kind of few studies that have done in kind of one a very comprehensive effort was undertaken in 2011. Then was an high-powered empowered committee was formed, and they looked at broadly 8 sectors, and that too hard infrastructure sectors like water supply, sewerage, solid waste management, drainage, roads, street light, urban transport, and they came up with number back in 2011. Also, that study was done on the kind of the cost base, or when they have taken the project cost from JNNURM projects. So they had come up with certain number at that point of time. That study didn't look at now the aspirations, the complexity has increased multifold in our cities itself, and also the kind of the requirement of the cities and the has changed. Air cities need to address air quality. We need better civic amenities. We need better parks. We need better maintenance of green cover. We need better sports facilities. We need walkability. So all of these were not taken into consideration at that point.
Back then.
World Bank did come up with a study, I think in 2022. They looked at the numbers of 2011. They extrapolated some bit by looking at the inflation and some other number, and also looked at okay, what is kind of how much India might have invested in those services, and they come up with a number over next 15 years how much money is needed. But still, I feel there is a significant need for these estimations. Might not kind of top up, but bottom up estimations. Why don't a city of 1 lakh population, why don't they have an estimate how much they should know what are the services they are providing? They are seeing where the city is expanding. They have their master plans or master plans in place. They should come up with this is the kind of the money that we will require over 15, 20 years. Sadly, I would say with confidence that none of our cities have that kind of estimation. Neither the frameworks that was adopted by Government of India at that point of time for empowered committee, there's a need to kind of look and reform that committee or some mechanism which looks at these estimations where it provides a broader framework. And also cities are kind of looking at, individual cities are looking at how much money do we need. This not only does give a fair estimation and understanding of how much taxes should be there at the local level, what should be the what kind of the grant should flow, also looking at what should be the role of multilateral and other bilateral funding, how should we look at the land value capture or other sources of revenue or borrowing itself. So this will give an overall kind of sense of how do we kind of mobilize this kind of finances. Some states have started working on city action plans, or Assam is doing a work where they are kind of through citizen participation, and also where executive and the elected representatives are coming together to come up with list of projects or something that city needs over next 5 years. So that gives a broader sense of how much money is needed, but a more comprehensive effort might be required at where union government, state government, local government, they might play different roles, where union government comes with more, provides a framework. We know The different is the need for different. There is so much differentiation in Maharashtra is somewhere else. Somewhere else, the requirement it will be also very different for Maharashtra and Nagaland, where states adopt that framework and cities kind of come up with these numbers, and then there is a kind of aggregation at each level. So some of this initiative, so we don't know as a interesting thing that I want to add. We don't know how much money we need. We also don't know how much money did we put in each of these sectors as well.
Yeah.
So our reporting formats they don't allow to look at. So in Karnataka, how much money was spent in water supply? How much money was spent in solid waste management? I think Karnataka, I think we can at least still find these numbers, but in most of the states we don't have.
Yeah, I think you mentioned it in the report mentions about the city finance audits. So we have audited accounts of some 3,800 urban local bodies, but again they are all classified based on input type, salaries, repairs, operations,
Not
not by
other functions.
or not other basis of service, right? How much was spent on sanitation? It's difficult to figure out. In fact, my next question was on this accountability mechanism, right? So this is one way to hold any government system or any, in fact, applies for private bodies as well as through audits. Apart from that, what other accountability mechanism exists in our cities? Since you mentioned that we don't have any estimates of how much cities require, but over the last 10 years or so, the different kinds of needs have also changed, right? Now we talk about walkability, something that was not necessarily that discussed maybe 10 years back, or green cover, or the services should improve. So we need to have the right kind of accountability mechanism so that these things can be highlighted. So does the accountability system exist now?
Yeah, I think when we think about accountability, I think there are different kind of types of accountability itself is needed. First, accountability is does city have a elected government, and are people able to hold their councillor accountable and go and ask, hey, look, this road is broken, what you are doing about it? That's one part of accountability, and are those people empowered to take those decisions?
So this is where again we fail, as in many cities in India haven't had elections for some time.
Don't have any elections for some time. So that's one level of accountability that itself is not there. Also, the accountability, if we just look at the performance accountability, cities do produce budgets, but the budgets, and that's one part of the accountability itself, where a government has put a vision. Budget is kind of a vision and planning statement. Look, these are the things that we are going to. This is money that I am spending, but it doesn't come with what are the kind of improvement in services that I am. So the budget is not linked to outputs and outcomes. So that's where there is a kind of loss of accountability. If as a citizen I want to hold my city accountable, I don't know against what I should hold them accountable. Is there a kind of a statement where they say, look, this is what where we will reach next year? Then I can ask them if they are reporting that where they are with respect to that. There is a service level benchmark framework. There are 28 indicators across 4 sectors, but the quality of that reporting itself is pretty unreliable. So there is a need to improve the reliability and credibility of that reporting itself. So there is on budgets. Budgets are not also that much credible. Audited accounts, they are getting published. So at least we know how much money they earn, how much money they have spent. Service level, there are 28 service level indicators, but the quality of reporting is so poor that we can't rely on those numbers. Then there are other forces like the statutory audit by local funds audit departments. There is a significant lag of years across. So that would have kind of looked at the compliance, looked at whether city officials or city followed the rules and regulations of law or in general financial practices. So those things are also coming up with a lag. So overall accountability framework, and also we talked about fragmentation of different kind of the services itself. So those platforms, the overall accountability framework is weak. Some attempts has been taken, like drawing from the Gram Sabhas in Panchayat, and some attempts has been there on what Sabhas, and but still there's a lot of progress needs to be done. So if I want, the panchayats are more accountable than cities. across the India. Actually,
Hmm.
I can kind of stick my neck out and say that.
Hmm.
I can, if I think about a panchayat, I can go to e-Gram Swaraj portal of Ministry of Panchayati Raj. I can go to any panchayat. I can see what happened with the money that was given by Finance Commission to that panchayat. I
Hmm.
can trace individual projects. I can trace when the kind of the tender was issued, how much money was spent. I can look at the photos of those projects as well. The same set of accountability doesn't exist
Hmm.
kind of in urban local governments.
Okay.
Those platforms itself doesn't
Hmm.
exist actually.
Yeah. And if I have to add, right, since you were mentioning in the beginning, right, the parastatals, they are the ones who are providing different kind of services, but they are under the state government. So there also there will be a mismatch, right? They are providing the services, but urban local bodies don't have much to do with them. And also one of the things that I found in the report is, again, the state government should be devolving different functions to the local bodies. For instance, there are 18 functions as per the constitution where the state can devolve to the local bodies, but effective devolution is quite low. For instance, Karnataka has legally devolved some 17 out of the 18 functions, but only three are in practice. Municipalities control three, so that again somewhere violates that, right? So accountability systems are relatively weak. Now, see, we have been talking a lot about the problems and how these problems have been there forever. But the blueprint also talks about things that can make cities better. In fact, there are suggestions on how to make the cities autonomous, how to improve the accountability mechanisms. So, what are the big ideas to make cities autonomous, fiscally autonomous?
So I think overall, if we look at three big buckets. One is financial sustainability. How can we ensure that cities have adequate money to spend? The second one is efficiency, financial efficiency, where there is efficient spending is happening in cities. The third one is financial accountability, or there are kind of the processes and systems for transparency and accountability in cities. If we look at overall kind of financial sustainability, I think a good functioning SFC that is critical, and the state government answerable or state government answerable to the kind of the recommendation where they are kind of working upon the recommendation of SFC and somebody is holding them accountable.
Hmm.
And I think there is no constitutional frame who would hold them accountable, but either CAG or even the people and the kind of the legislative assembly is holding them accountable. So some sort of, because we know in our kind of the taxation structure that we are in our country, state government would have more resources on this. If you look at, so this is on the kind of on the grants, there is a significant money, and we know the political economy of local government taxes might be very complex in India. So some sort of devolution from buoyant sources of revenue like GST, SGST might be a good idea. Although there is a case for relooking at the overall GST framework itself, where there is a union GST or kind of CGST, state GST. There can be a third city GST as well, but it's a long-term kind of battle. It's a 20 years kind of reform idea. But if we think about in short term, what can be done? The state government's devolving for the GST itself. I think the recent State Finance Commission of Karnataka has recommended that. The benefit of it, where cities have also a role to play in improving the overall economy of the city. Because we know the GST collection from that city will be directly linked to the economy of the city as well. So if some money comes back to the city administration, there might be kind of
So it realigns the incentives, right? If the city, yeah,
uh,
yeah. So basically, the cities do things which leads to greater consumption of different kinds of goods and services in the city, then they are going to get more revenue out of it.
they're going to get more revenue out of it. And more, I think the third one is on the overall kind of user charges now. And I think you touched upon one of the sections where less user charges means less money going to operation and maintenance as well. As India, we have invested a lot in last 10 to 15 years on water supply, solid waste management. And if we are not able to create enough space for operation and maintenance for those assets we might need to replace those assets pretty soon. So there is a case for reforming user charges and also coming up with, now we have a smart technology like smart metering. All of those things can be implemented at easy kind of the cost. They're cost effective and work as well. So that's something that can be done on the overall on the sustainability part. Efficiency part is where I think not much has focus has been in last 20-25 years. And that's where I think a lot of effort needs to go in. In efficiency part, I think there are two aspects that I will like to cover. One is improving the allocation efficiency, improving the planning of the expenditure itself, where expenditure is planned linked to certain service outcomes. So the way I said, the city action plans or some kind of where city puts a vision forward. In next 5 years, I want to reach here. These are the 20 things that I need to do. I might have money for just 5 things, and I'm prioritizing out of the total money that will be available with me or with the city over next 5 years. So that will improve the overall expenditure efficiency as well. And the budgets needs to align to those kind of the city action plans, the planning, and then the annual budgets are deriving from that 5 year plan itself. Then the second thing where there's a need for a lot of work, and I think that's where we are kind of stuck as a country, is whatever money is available, are we able to convert them into outputs and outcomes? Are we able to spend them? And that's where there's a need for significant improvement in capacities to spend. As simple as that. We need more engineers on ground. We need better capacity to design projects, to kind of draw DPR. If somebody gives me money for air quality, our engineers and our city administration should know how to solve for air quality and what type of projects need to be undertaken and how are we better able to contract. So overall capacities on project execution need significant improvement across India. And that's where state governments can play a larger role, where because we know we can't create capacities in all 4,000 or all 5,000 cities actually. So where state government are creating capacities at the state level, not to centralize, but to kind of aid and support cities with preparing the project, in planning the project, in doing the financial analysis of the projects. Larger cities can do on their own, but the smaller cities, they look to states, and the state has those capacity to help them. The third on the accountability part, I think there is a need for radical transparency in projects, in where I should know what are the 5 projects that city has planned in my neighborhood and what's happening with those projects. I think the kind of the technology that we have, the kind of databases that we can build, if this is possible in panchayat, this should be possible in cities as well. So radical transparency in neighborhood projects can be one thing that can lead to significant difference in overall kind of the quality of life in cities. This will also has where it will make urban citizens more aware, and urban citizens kind of can play a larger role where they are more involved as well. If I don't have any information today, I don't know how to get involved. But if I know, and then I can hold the local government accountable and I can take more interest in the affairs of the city.
So again, Prabhat, a couple of questions here, right? First, when you said that state finance commission's recommendations the state should take up, one of the thing I always wonder is at the union level, right? So the union finance commission recommends, typically the union governments follow that, but same thing doesn't happen at the states level. Typically, the many states, the state finance commissions are not formed on time, the reports are not considered on time. So how can the incentives be realigned here, right? So because there is a difference in the way things happen at the union level, at the state level. And secondly, when you mentioned about efficiency part, right, that whatever money is being spent, it should be linked to certain outputs, outcomes. And currently at the union level, we have these output outcome frameworks, but again, we don't have the mechanisms where these inputs are exactly connected to the outputs, or maybe once the next year you don't see how much of the money was spent on that output or how much output outcome you got. So how can all these things happen at the local levels if these things have not happened till now at the union level?
Yeah, I think I will first take the SFC thing. We know the bargaining power of state or the legitimacy that is state and that enjoys and the kind of where state can take union government to quote, or
Yeah.
they can kind of. So there is a good
Asymmetry.
fiscal balance between union and state. The same when it comes to state and local government, there's a lot of power asymmetry where cities are not able to hold the state accountable. I think more elections and empowered elected representative at the and some more autonomy given to them might shift this balance a bit.
Yeah.
I feel.
Yeah.
But other things that I think we as a civil society can play a larger role, where the academicians, the researchers, newspapers, they follow a lot on Union Finance Commission and what center is doing with respect to implementation of Union Finance Commission recommendations. But none of this kind of narratives or even discussions happen what the state government does with the State Finance Commission.
Yeah.
So recently, Karnataka State Finance Commission came out with this report. The state government kind of accepted some of the recommendation as well. There's a very less discussion in press or in academic circle or in public policy circle or in researcher communities on what's happening at the state finance commission level. So I think some more discussions might not solve for the power asymmetry, but at least more people are aware. The MLAs are asking right questions in the assembly. So some more thing where some external pressure is being put on the state government, work on the recommendation of SFC. If we are able to do that, I think that might kind of improve the SFC function a bit. On the second question, can you repeat the second question, please?
The money linked to output outcomes.
Yeah. So I think it's easy at the local government level.
Okay.
Because union government is a very complex, the kind of, when you think of defense, when you think about, so the measurability of outcomes and the outcomes are very complex and it's pretty difficult at the union level. But
also the magnitude.
But in city level, the kind of the functions they provide. So whether the streets are cleaned each day or not.
Correct. It's also very relatable, I guess. Right? If I'm staying in a locality, I can figure out how much money was spent, whether the street is clean or not.
Yeah. So I think at the city level, it's easy and it's more direct. It's not abstract. So here it would be easy. Just the kind of we need to relook at our database, how we collect data, how we maintain data, how do we track performance, and also putting this in the overall framework itself, the annual reporting framework or budgeting framework. If we are able to bring that in, I think it's easy. There might be need to invest in the capacities, but at city level, it will be more easy than implementing at the state level or at the India.
Thank you, Prabhat, for joining us in this conversation and for giving us a detailed overview of urban governance. One last thing, in case you want these things, you want these things to change definitely, but in case you want our listeners to do something about it, what would you recommend?
So I think we all need to become a active citizen, where we need to look at our budgets of the city, look at the income statements that they are providing or financial statements that they are providing. Look at the service levels itself, whether service levels are reflective of what is the situation on ground. In many places, many cities, there are ward offices. In many cities, the ward sabha meetings happens. Our RWA meetings happen. So we as a citizen should participate more in it. Then we will be able to know what is the kind of the problems that exist, what is the kind of money that being spent, how our the tax money that we are paying is being utilized. And then we can start questioning the people as well, and we can try to understand, and we can kind of go and check with ward officers what are the 10 projects or what are the projects that are planned in our neighborhood. We can write to our councillor and ask the councillor what are the different projects that are identified or that are supposed to be done this year, and we can act on it. So I think more active citizen, where each of us is kind of taking some steps to improve quality of life around us, more on public goods, I would say, where we are kind of, because we know nobody is looking at public good in Indian cities. So more citizens looking after public good might kind of change the way we perceive our cities, or change the way we kind of get services from the cities itself.
Thank you, Prabhat. Thank you, listeners, for joining us in this conversation. And in fact, money is important, but also idea about clearer roles, stronger institutions, accountability, all these things is important. Getting the balance right is what will define the next phase of India's urban transformation. Thank you again. We'll meet again in one more episode of All Things Policy.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Sarthak.
If you liked our show, dive into Takshashila's research on technology, strategy, and economic affairs. Check us out at our Twitter handle @Takshashila INST or our website takshashila.org.in.